Like the ending was written and then torn out. A killer who didn't just murder, he taunted. Who didn't just hide, but demanded to be seen. Who turned fear into a public performance. And decades later, we're still asking the same question. Who was he, and why couldn't the system stop him? Let's set the scene. Northern California, late 1960s. Let's go back. Late 1960s, Northern California. San Francisco is idealistic, rebellious, and alive. No internet, no cell phones. Information moved through newspapers, slowly, deliberately. And that matters because the Zodiac understood something early on. If you control the media, you control the fear. Lake Herman Road, the first victims. December 20th, 1968. 2 teenagers. David Faraday, 17, and Betty Lou Jensen, 16. They were parked on Lake Herman Road, a quiet place familiar to local teens. David was shot almost immediately. Betty Lou ran and was shot multiple times in the back. No robbery, no sexual assault, no explanation. At the time, police didn't know this was the beginning of something larger. Blue Rock Springs, and then he calls. July 4th, 1969, another couple. Darlene Farron, who was killed, and Mike Magoo, who survived. Magoo, I think is his name. After the shooting, the killer does something chilling. He calls police. Calm, controlled, detailed. From a behavioral standpoint, this is important. This wasn't panic. This was power. This was control. That was his whole mission. Lake Berryessa, the costume. September 27th, 1969. A daylight attack, a hood, a crosshair symbol. Cecilia Shepard, who later died, and Brian Hartnell, who survived. This wasn't rushed, this was ritualized. And for investigators, that signals planning, not impulse. Very controlled again. Number 5, Paul Stine, The City Changes Everything. October 11th, 1969. Paul Stine, a San Francisco taxi driver, is murdered in the city. Witnesses see the suspect, police create sketches, and yet somehow the killer slips away, a moment that would haunt the case forever. The letters begin. Now comes what truly sets the Zodiac apart, the letters. He writes to newspapers, includes ciphers, demands publication. One cipher is cracked quickly. Another takes over 50 years, solved by civilians, not police. This wasn't just evidence, it was communication. The psychology of the Zodiac. The Zodiac didn't just want victims. He wanted attention, validation, control, notoriety, right? He wanted to be in control and to be noticed and to play a game of cat and mouse with law enforcement. He wanted to prove he was smarter than the police, smarter than the system, and in many ways, he succeeded. Why this case was so hard to solve legally. From a legal standpoint, this case would have been a nightmare. New York City and California, as large as it was and as expansive as it was, back in that time, from my understanding, they were actually multiple jurisdictions. So if there was a case that happened even in the same city, it may belong to different jurisdictions, which would be a complete nightmare. Not only that, but forensics wasn't really where it is today. You've got blood spatter evidence, you've got all this stuff going on there. Minimal forensic technologies we're talking about, contaminated evidence, people like he did his crimes out in the public, usually like they called them the lookout spots or the makeout spots or whatever you wanted to call them. And so, there were people coming and going, and then no DNA standards. They didn't even know what DNA was at that point. And legally speaking, suspicion is not proof. Just because someone is strange, just because someone looks like they might be a serial killer, doesn't give you proof to arrest them or to do anything of that sort. You don't arrest on vibes. You arrest on evidence that survives in court. So let's talk about the suspects in this case. The most talked about suspect is Arthur Lee Allen. And this is where the recent Netflix documentary, This is the Zodiac Speaking, comes in. The series presents family testimony, behavioral patterns, and circumstantial connections. And to many viewers, it feels convincing. But legally, Arthur Lee Allen was never charged, never convicted, and key forensic evidence never conclusively tied him to the crimes. This doesn't mean he wasn't the Zodiac. There is a difference between what we think we can prove and what we can actually prove. But the standard in court, especially for a criminal case, is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So just because it acts like it fits and it feels like it fits and we want it to fit, doesn't mean it fits, and doesn't mean that it would be able to overcome the scrutiny required to convict someone of a crime of this nature and this magnitude. It essentially means that the law at that time cannot say that he did this. And the other thing is, whether or not the family was being honest, that's one thing. I'm not saying that they're not. I'm just saying the credibility of the witnesses, the evidence that they have. I mean, that's another thing. So let's also talk about the Netflix effect, unmasked versus proven. Here's where true crime can get tricky. Documentaries often say the truth has been revealed. Sounds great, right? Well, their truth is different than criminal law truth, honestly. But legally speaking, revealed is not the same as proven. We would love for it to be. We would love to say that the Zodiac case has been definitively solved. Unfortunately, that does not appear to be the case. Netflix reopened the conversation, not the case, because they have no power over the case. And that distinction matters. Could the Zodiac case ever be solved? Possibly, if viable DNA is recovered. Genetic genealogy confirms the suspect. They actually did that with the gentleman out in California. I'm trying to remember his name. I'm trying to remember. But anyway, he was a former police officer, and he was the one who would kill both the husband and the wife, and he would put plates on them. I forget what his name was now, but yeah, he was actually D'Angelo, I think was his last name. Genetic genealogy, that's how he was caught. Evidence aligns beyond a reasonable doubt. But even then, prosecution requires certainty, not belief. And the Zodiac may have known exactly how to avoid that line. So in closing, this case isn't just about a killer. It's about victims who deserve remembrance, families who never got closure, and a justice system that refuses to guess. The Zodiac wanted to be known, and yet, responsibly, legally, we will say, we don't know. Wish we did. I wish we could give all the answers for all the unsolved crimes and help the family who definitely suffers more than anyone else, and realize that these were real victims. It doesn't do them as much justice. I mean, saying their names out loud is what we can do here. But it's really sad that they were, and sometimes saying you don't know, that's the most unsettling truth of all, especially after all of these years. So, in closing, I would ask that you follow Grace and Gavel for thoughtful true crime analysis, and share the episode if unresolved cases fascinate you or if you know someone who does, as well as feel free to leave a review or leave a comment to support victim-centered storytelling, because that is what our motto is all about, where truth meets compassion, because these victims were real people loved by others, and the story isn't about the person who snuffed their life out. The story is about them and the justice that they ultimately deserve. So thank you for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.